Our next panel is on the challenges and opportunities for heritage in rural Manitoba. So we have another moderator. Now this gentleman, Gordon Goldsborough, I got to know today because we're in the studio together. So Gordon will be coming and taking my spot. But let me introduce you a little bit. Gordon is a member of the Department of Biological Sciences at the University of Manitoba. Prior to moving to the university in 1996, he worked for 7 years at Brandt University and 4 years at the University of Alberta in Edmonton. He is an active member of the Manitoba Historical Society, being its president, head researcher, webmaster, and the editor of Prairie History magazine. He has mapped thousands of historic sites around the province. He has a weekly column on the weekend morning show of CBC Radio 1, was a citizen member of the City of Winnipeg Historical Buildings and Resources Committee, is a citizen member of the Heritage Committee of Engineers, Geoscientists Manitoba, and it goes on and on and on. And he was the voice of one of the videos that you heard during the lunch hour, so that's probably the biggest, right? Now, Gordon, if you're ready, come and join us. Here's a chair for you.
Well, thank you very much, Rob. I appreciate that introduction. Before we get into the panel this afternoon, I think I should maybe preface it with a bit of a context. Last year at the Heritage Summit, we had a session on rural heritage because many of us have rural roots, and we know that in rural areas it's often more challenging to do things than it is in places where there's a large cohort of people. So we had a very good discussion last year, and there was enough good feedback that it was felt right to do it again this year. And if you recall the presentation that Tracy Turner made this morning, we found that 40% of our participants last year were from places outside of Winnipeg. We don't have the statistics yet for this year. We're hopeful it'll be in the same realm because, of course, the technology really makes this possible. And it seems to me that in the future, we will continue to do things the way that we are doing it this year and last year. So if there's any silver lining in the pandemic cloud, it seems to me that it makes us much more, I think, amenable to doing things like these sort of online events. So even though I think there is a definite advantage in getting together and sharing experiences with people in person, I think there's also advantages of doing things virtually as well. So our panelists this afternoon are going to speak to the unique challenges of working in rural Manitoba. We have 3 presentations, and we're going to rearrange it just a little bit from what was shown in the program. We're going to begin with a couple of folks from Winnipegosis. Now, when we first began talking about who we would get to come and speak on this topic, I think invariably the thoughts came around to the folks at Winnipegosis because there's lots of good people out there doing wonderful things all over the province, but I think they'd be hard-pressed to beat the folks in Winnipegosis. They are doing absolutely wonderful things, and I think they deserve all of the accolades that they receive. We have 2 people today from the Winnipegosis Historical Society. We have Loretta Dyck, who is a retired healthcare worker and has served on the Historical Society's board since 2008. Her passion for vintage clothing translates into authentic costumes for their many mannequins at the museum. She also works on displays and is a volunteer curator. Our other presenter is Jo Bunka. She is a retired teacher and has served on the Society's board since 1987. She is a volunteer curator. She supervises and orients summer students, applies for grants, conducts research to add to their museum stories, and I'm sure a whole wealth of other tasks that she just far too numerous to list. She also shares local history through weekly Facebook posts. So I'll turn it over to you two to speak over the next, say, 10 minutes or so, and if need be, I'll jump in and just give you a little hint as we're getting close to the end. So take it away, folks.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for those kind words, Gordon. Jo Bunka and myself, Loretta Dyck, are volunteer curators in the village of Winnipegosis. We maintain 2 museums in a small rural community of just over 600 people, the Winnipegosis Museum and the Medhouse Museum. When we were asked to speak about the specific challenges due to being in a rural area and how these challenges could be addressed, Jo and I were at first taken aback and truly wondered what we might possibly bring to an audience of educated museum folks such as yourselves. Across Canada, we know that there are many small rural communities with museums just like ours, and that each area has its own unique story to tell. We believe that makes these rural museums important holders of history. The question this conference is asking us to consider is, how do they face the specific rural challenges and how can they be addressed? In other words, how do we ensure a future?
Though being small does not mean you cannot be mighty, lacking population can create a number of unique challenges. For example, 1, some small communities lack large corporations that frequently provide substantial financial backing for nonprofit organizations such as museums. 2, in small communities, it's often the same local people involved in volunteer positions on many different committees, so the potential of burnout can be a real problem. 3, in small communities, there may be fewer tourist dollars that need to be spread rather thinly throughout different venues. 4, with no paid staff beyond summer students, volunteers have to learn to do many things and give much personal time to create successful museum programs. 5th, lack of training in museum practices can result in mere collections of old stuff rather than a focus or vision of the area's story. 6, the pandemic has been a challenge. In small rural museums, having annual fundraising events canceled or restricted due to health regulations and the loss of visitors to museums has affected the financial stability of small museums. 7th, inclusiveness and decolonization of rural museum stories can be a challenge without easy access to research material.
So how then does a small community like Winnipegosis sustain 2 museums and work to ensure their future? Well, perhaps understanding a bit about our geographical area will help give a clearer picture of where we started and how we plan to go forward. We are located in the municipality of Mossy River. Ranching, grain farming, fishing, those are some of our major resources. But like many small rural communities throughout Canada, we are fortunate to have services available within our community, and we believe that Winnipegosis is a wonderful place to live and raise a family. We have a pretty town, friendly residents, and all types of recreation at our fingertips. This is a sentiment you will probably find in every small rural Canadian community.
To return to our basic premise, though, how can a small rural museum be successful points of interest in sparsely populated areas? How can we move forward and envision a future with fewer local residents to attract? How do we face these challenges? We believe that this can happen if small rural museums are founded on a vision, not a population count. A vision that is allowed to grow and change with time. We believe small museums will move forward, but only if there's always a vision. We believe you need to know where you came from and where you hope to go.
If you are operating a small or even a large museum, we would like to challenge you to think about the beginnings of your museum. What was the vision that was the impetus for your creation? Was that someone or something that spurred the inception of your museum? Our vision began with a series of events that sort of happened at almost the same time in 1985. A very organized lady moved back to our village. A committee was formed to plan a 75th celebration of our community. The CN offered the village the land and station for $1, and a group of like-minded people who had a strong interest in history became involved and formed the museum board. The early vision of the Winnipegosis Museum as simply showcasing a collection of things from our past for the upcoming anniversary began to evolve into a more organized vision of an actual museum.
The vision changed from a mere collection of stuff to an organized way to document our story through artifacts that were unique to the history of Winnipegosis and area. This vision then brought about a plan. This plan continues to need updating as our board sees ways to improve or refocus our collections, as well as maintain our historical buildings. Creating 5-year plans has helped us move forward. Important as it is to have a vision, a good vision must be ready to accept and explore change. Sometimes you need to look at what you are doing through fresh eyes. The pandemic has certainly caused all museums to adapt and change. Working towards inclusiveness needs commitment.
In our day-to-day management of our museums, as we knew we couldn't depend on expanding population to bring more visitors and more revenue, we realized we needed to do something to entice the existing population to come back over and over and to reach beyond our municipality borders for tourists. We recognize that visitors are looking for something fresh and new. So here's the dilemma that we see for all small museums. We can't change our history or the story of our development or culture, and the need to be inclusive and demonstrate culture respect. These are the basis of our museums, but our board has taken the philosophy that we must try constantly to find new ways to add to our story, to seek out details that enrich the focus, and to provide our audiences with something to look forward to every year.
This brings us to how the Association of Manitoba Museums has played an important role in helping us remain viable and work towards a future. Both Loretta and I have completed the courses for certification in museum practices. Using what we learned, we were able to assist our board to put into place best practices. We developed 8 policies. We created a mission statement, code of ethics and values. We created a manual to help give us direction. We invited consultants, and we did our best to follow their advice. Putting into practice what we learned was always a challenge. It's easy to follow past practices, whether good or bad, rather than spend the energy to implement change.
Building community partners was another very important step that we felt would ensure a future for our museums. In our small community, we are in partnership with many groups. We are fortunate to have a memorandum of understanding with our municipality, as well as the local thrift store. Both of these entities provide our historical society with an annual financial backing. We partner with our schools, the Royal Purple and Elks clubs, the local Métis Little Muddy Water group, with our local hotel, with the various church groups, with weekend celebration of Mossy River Days, as well as with our local stores and businesses. We are constantly on the lookout for ways to work with other groups. We provide tax receipts for donations and advertising for local businesses, and the knowledge that they can count on us when we are needed.
To envision a future, we have taken the attitude that actively helping other groups creates an atmosphere of mutual respect and visibility. Being seasonal means we cannot give tours when the weather turns cold, but we don't hibernate. We partner with the Senior Center to organize a Remembrance Day service. We bring in displays. These displays, thanks to Loretta's research, change focus every year. Though we do spring and fall tours with our schools, we also bring displays or presentations into the schools. We sponsor a poster contest for Manitoba Day. We place displays in the personal care home.
Our board members frequently talk about ideas for changes in the upcoming year. Like this year, we did a hat display and we created some excitement when we asked for ideas or we asked, do you have a hat that we should display? Involving our public that way creates ownership, and ownership means we're not stagnant. If we're not stagnant, we feel we are moving towards a future. One of the big changes that we're trying to implement is to use technology more and more in our advertising, our sharing of our history, and our collections. Jo has created a Facebook page, and she has over 1,000 hits every week. We use an electronic donors board in our lobby. We have a website. We appreciate receiving the AMM's electronic newsletters, but we have dreams of even more.
None of what we do could be done without volunteers. As a board, we have taken time to discuss and plan ways to make the best use of our volunteers. Our board held a training session to discover our own personal strengths and became acutely aware of how different we all are. We soon discovered that when we work together as a unit, our different talents create a strong museum board. As a result, we feel we have stumbled on some key ways to keep volunteers. 1, don't expect everyone to do everything. Allow people to be themselves. Everyone has different talents and likes or dislikes. 2, accept people's limitations. If a volunteer only wishes to help at one particular event once a year, how wonderful. We've learned not to ask for more. 3, be clear about what you ask a volunteer to do. What may seem easy to someone who has done this thing before may be frightening or overwhelming if this is your first time doing it. 4, be thankful for volunteers and say it. Volunteers are the future. They are potentially our new board members. Like many museums, we're fortunate to have a group of volunteers called Friends of the Museum. They give time and resources. They talk about us to others. They help at fundraisers. Together with our board, they make us viable.
For every museum, big or small, funding is always an issue. In small communities, fundraisers are a way of life. If the museum board expects support, we know we must be seen supporting other groups. Again, though, fundraising takes a lot of effort, and it does provide networking and an opportunity to advertise and showcase the museums. Without provincial and federal grants and foundations, we would not be able to foresee a future. These are the financial supports that allow us to dream big and work toward future plans. Here is where our 5-year plans have meant that we can restore, renovate, and renew. In Winnipegosis, both our building sites are well over 100 years old. They require maintenance and restoration if they are to be there for future generations. We discuss, plan, and then plan some more. Then we begin to seek funding.
Programs like Young Canada Works are the only way we are able to have employees. Summer students are the backbone of our tourist season. They are also future volunteers. We were so fortunate to have summer students again this year. Being their employer does require volunteer time to train the students so they can meet our expectations. Giving them daily routines, clear instructions, and allowing them to have a voice in setting up displays and preparing scripts builds ownership of the job, and ownership evokes pride in what they are doing.
Our board believes anything that engages youth in our museum story is building our future. We have had summer students for the past 14 years. They have become our friends. They stay in contact through Facebook. They tell us their time with us has helped them in their studies as well in other employment. And most importantly, they remain our ambassadors. Yes, many come unprepared for the working world, but we get to watch them grow and spread their wings as they find their strengths.
In closing, we would like to say that we have no secret for success, but we recognize that there are things that we are doing to build a future. Having a vision, making a plan, partnering with other groups, turning to provincial associations for professional advice, valuing volunteers, working with summer students, being willing to adapt when working under restrictions such as COVID, ensuring inclusiveness, and working as a team with board members. We believe adapting these measures will help to meet the challenges facing small rural museums throughout Canada.
So where do we go from here? Enthusiastically forward, always remembering our roots and those who came before us, and consistently involving the community in museum business. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Well, thank you both. Joe, Loretta, you're so inspirational. I was going to wax eloquent about how wonderful the work you're doing is, but I can't say it any better than one of the comments in the chat where it says, you ladies rock. You present a good, strong force for like-mindedness, heritage, passion, and great leadership. Oh, exactly. My words, my thoughts exactly. Thank you very much. Now, some of you may know that this Heritage Summit is being organized by a group of 8 provincial heritage agencies. And we've been working together. In fact, we have all, I think, realized just how wonderful it is to work cooperatively with each other, because we often have skills that we can draw upon from other groups. So, for example, when we started to talk about technology and how that might be a way to get beyond some of the challenges faced in rural Manitoba, we thought, well, who can we get to talk about some of the opportunities presented by technology? And inevitably it came to Gord McBean. I've known Gord for a number of years, and of course, he has spent an awful lot of his time in his past working in the area of technology. He chose a career in theater and broadcasting, and worked in both of those before becoming involved in educational technology in 1972. Gord worked for 40 years helping college instructors prepare classroom materials. At Red River College, he created the Teaching Learning Technology Center to support and train instructors in the use of technology, ranging from personal computers to putting their courses online. In addition to audio and video work, Gord is an avid photographer. And when not involved in all of this work, and of course also genealogy through the Manitoba Genealogical Society that is hosting us here today, he loves to cross-country ski, cycle, canoe, and travel with his wife in their RV around North America with much genealogy and cemetery visiting. So, Gord, take it away.
Oh, we're sharing the same spot. I've got to apologize for my look today. Our water line in our street blew a geyser all day yesterday, and we've got a major water feed down our street, so it took them all day to fix it. And when they turned the water on last night, it blew the water line inside our house. So I was dealing with water issues and chasing the city and a plumber into the wee hours of the morning. So I'm unshowered and I'm tired, so if I yawn, you'll have to apologize. I have to apologize for that to you. The being involved with technology started way back when I was in elementary school, and they used to have the long, meter-long sticks with the white pointed end on it. When I started working in the field, this became the pointer that you could point things out with. And of course nowadays we end up with laser pointers, which is also the control for my PowerPoint presentation here. So I'll get Sonny to switch over to the PowerPoint. And talking about technology and really between urban and rural areas, we have a digital divide in that the have and have-nots, if you will. The access to high-speed internet is critical for today. We've heard a lot of people talking, talking today about how they had to migrate to a digital platform due to COVID-19 and not being able to get together. So we've started to, I think, be much more aware of the limitations or the problems that some of our members have with connecting. I found this statement to be quite alarming in some ways, but it's basically the services available to select residential dwellings in Manitoba, and it says where access and technology permit. So basically, if you have it, you have it, and if you don't, you're out of luck. And even a few years back, rural Manitoba did not have the access. My daughter lives in Morden, and they're on the edge of town in a new development. They had the worst internet connection around. This fall, with Valley Fiber pushing through and MTS push through, they are now sitting on fiber, and I was out there for the Thanksgiving weekend, and I realized what high-speed internet really means. Because even in the city, I live in an older part of the city, and I cannot get faster internet than what I currently have. And there's so many solutions to the whole concept of internet connectivity. At home, I'm sitting on a copper connection. My daughter now is on a fiber connection. Last year, a lot of people don't realize that the whole Heritage Summit, a vital piece of the internet infrastructure failed, and we delivered the whole day using a cellular connection. So there's another option of some people on their smartphone may be watching this today. We also have wireless, which is different than the cellular connection. People connect to a tower with an antenna on their own location, and they're able to get wireless connection. Some have microwave linked, which is a point-to-point, a P2P. And then finally, in the very remote areas, we're talking about satellite solutions. So there's a whole gamut of solutions that people are bringing about right now. If you look at the speed that's available to people, the federal government has set a standard of 50 download and 10 megabits per second upload as being what they're aiming for. And if we look across that chart, it's it shows in a rural area, in an urban area, 97% of the people have access, but at that time, I believe it's 37% had the access to high-speed internet if you were outside a major center. So the federal government has started a fund, several funds actually, that are trying to get companies to service rural areas more with internet. If we look at how that looks on a map, we look at the light gray area is where broadband connections are available, and just because the color there doesn't mean people have the access, it's just in that area. The 5010 is the dark spots on there, and then we see a whole vast area of the rural Manitoba in particular that has only access using a satellite connection. If we look within Manitoba, this gives you a sense of the spots that have access to a 5010 connection for the internet. So there's vast stretches of Manitoba that aren't currently connected. And a lot of what I'm presenting here is based on old data because the reports that finally come out are always a couple of years out of date, so we don't have the latest information. And with the federal government over this summer, things like Valley Fiber got a large grant to push fiber out into rural Manitoba. They're based in Winkler, and they're pushing along the major highway routes to have high-speed internet connection. Some of the other companies that are available, all using different technologies, are listed here, and you can see some of the speeds and the service that they offer. So for example, Crow up in the Interlake is offering radio tower connectivity. So if you put an antenna on your place, you need line of sight between those towers, otherwise you don't get a good signal. So generally a 10-foot tower, it might be a 20-foot tower on top of your building. So much of the emphasis is the capital region. If we look at some of the companies servicing the area close to Winnipeg, there's a whole variety of options and vendors that are available using different technology. As soon as you move outside of Winnipeg, it gets few and far between. So you get the Winkler area initially and Steinbach area, and then up into Selkirk. Have companies that are specializing in that area. As I say, it's older data. Through this summer, a number of them have received federal funding, or they also work with the local municipalities in partnership to try to service those municipalities. So a couple of the examples, Swift being one of them, the Steinbach area, and they're doing fiber to the home, and they're trying to do 7,000 new rural homes as part of their initiative. And within the towns that they serve, they tend to provide connectivity for the core of those towns. If you look at a different map, or a different way of showing Swift, you get the pink area that they're expanding into and the green area that they're currently serving. Again, if you're talking about wireless, this particular company is using towers to connect. If you're in the yellow dot, you get really good service. If you're in the red area around it, you get a lower grade of service. Again, the gray is lower and the white is fringe. You may or may not get decent service depending on the topography and how much the big trees and such in the area. So it really is a have and have not. In Westman Communication Group, I couldn't find any details on them, but I understand that they're pushing internet out through the Westman area. High Speed Crow does Winnipeg, but also up into the Interlake with radio tower connectivity. This is the Valley Fiber one that I talked about, and you can go online and look at their interactive coverage map. So if you're lucky enough to be in the green, it means that they've come in and they're servicing that area currently. If you're yellow area, it's an area that as of this spring, you could register and they would let you know as they provided coverage to that area. So something like Miami, Manitoba, they've serviced the whole town, and the interesting part is on the south end of town, it's the racetrack that somehow gets green. If we go to an area along Provincial Highway number 3, which is Manitou, it's in the coming zone. So areas along, if you happen to front onto a major trunk highway, they are willing to splice you into the fiber network at that point. I'm assuming the areas that don't have yellow is because there are no houses on those quarter sections. There's a whole list of RMs that either have partial or spots in them that have some high-speed internet into that location. And there's so many different standards out there. Fiber to the X is fiber to H is home, fiber to whatever. You're connected directly to the fiber network. That's the fastest speed that you can get out there. My daughter's home is now fiber to the house. Another one is Broadcast Communications North is the one that's specializing in connecting northern Manitoba. So they're using two different communication or microwave, such as the Manitoba Hydro system running up north. They're able to take that service and then do a distribution locally using different methods. So it's sort of hard to see on this map, but it shows the number of communities that they're currently serving. And if you look closer, you see that the ones in Pungasi and over on that side of the province, they are relying on satellite connectivity, whereas up through the central area where hydro put in the microwave systems, they are connecting through tower systems. And another interesting way is the Park West Fiber Optic Co-op. This was an initiative of the school division of Prairie View, of Park West, and the Prairie View, Yellowhead, and Hamiota, where they got together and they said, we're not on anyone's list to get fiber quickly. The school really needs it. They're going to put it in. If we piggyback on top of that, we can bring fiber to our municipalities and the town of Hamiota and the population centers in that area. So they've gone in and created a unique hybrid where it's community owned, and they buy the bulk connectivity to one of the main ISPs or internet service providers, and they're providing high-speed internet into their communities. So in summary, access depends on the location you are and population density. If there's high enough density, people will get fiber or possibly copper connection at a decent speed. And if they're further out, the next step will be through radio towers that people can connect to in the rural area. The next one is funding for the connection, for your own personal connection and for your community group. How do you get funding to get that connection? Because connecting to a high-speed internet is not cheap, especially if you have to put up a tower and a radio antenna system and buy the head-end equipment to make your connection work. So we talked about also the need for funding to buy that equipment, but then there's the local having volunteers with the technical knowledge. Is there someone in your group or your community that can help you connect and provide the high-speed internet? Because several people have talked through the day about the need to have someone that's able to fix it if something goes wrong, but you also, the other thing is in the future, you're going to have to upkeep equipment and replace equipment, so it's going to cost money. So if we look at the 50-10 standard, it's a progressive rollout. The current initiative runs up to 2024 where the funding is taking place. They're hoping that by 2032, I believe it was, that all Canadians, or 98% of Canadians, will have access to high-speed internet. The last point is the motivation. What's in it for them as opposed to what's in it for me? Why are these companies going to provide service to your area, and what are they going to make available? So it's both for the consumer, what's in it for the group to get connected and pay the cost of having a high-speed connection, and for whoever the provider is that's going to move into the area. One of the things that's moved this ahead was the amount of funds that the federal government made available. As I mentioned, the funding runs up to 2024, and it's because of that extra funding that private groups or private industry is getting involved with the incentive. It has the incentive to bring or spread the high-speed internet. So if you want to have access in your institution for people coming in to be able to look things up or to host content and push it out to the rest of the world, that's when you need the high-speed internet. So I'm speaking to the rural people. Probably already know all of this. A lot of the urban people don't really realize how bad the connection is, and I didn't really understand the difficulties people had until over this winter I ran a whole series of webinars and workshops, and several of the people I were dealing with were having issues and ended up using their cell phone to attend the webinar because they had better connection on their cell phone than they could get on their internet connection at the time. So we're hopefully that the future is bright, that there's new things coming, and we can sort of look forward to that. The other one is, in some cases, like the Westman group, it's a matter of local people banding together and pushing or going to the powers that be to get that connectivity within their group or within their area. So a lot of things to think about, a lot of possible solutions out there. It's going to be interesting to look a year or two from now and just see where we are in terms of connectivity. So thank you very much. I'll hand you back to the other Gordon.
Well, thank you, Gordon. The old expression was, may you live in interesting times. Well, we are living in interesting times for a lot of ways, not just medically, but technologically. And we are seeing transformations. Right now, for example, I'm having a fiber optic cable installed down my street. And so I'm looking forward to that high-speed service that Gord tantalizes exists in Morden. And I've also a feeling that Elon Musk's Starlink is going to be a game changer, especially if you don't live near a fiber optic cable. Some of my friends have got the service and they're swearing that it's transformative, the kind of connectivity they get in remote areas. For the last presentation in this session, we have another a pair of formidable people, both affiliated with the Association of Manitoba Museums. Monique Brandt has been the executive director of the association for over 17 years. Prior to that, she was the curator at the Dugald Costume Museum, also known as the Costume Museum of Canada, and she was there for 8 years. Monique has been involved with the AMM and the museum and heritage sector for 30 years. Meanwhile, Beryth Strong joined the Association of Manitoba Museums as its training communications coordinator in July of 2004. In that position, she has been to many museums around the province, setting up courses and participating in regional meetings. She has met museum staff, volunteers, board members, and has heard their concerns, their problems, and marveled at their solutions. So I'm hoping we're going to hear some more about those solutions in this session. So take it away, please.
Great, thanks very much, Gordon. We'll see here if Beryth can get our slides set up. Yay! I love it when technology works.
It is always amazing.
As Gordon said, I'm Monique Brandt. I'm the executive director, and he said a little bit about who we are and why we are talking. I also want to add that I grew up in a very small town in Manitoba, a town which is probably small and getting smaller.
Okay.
So basically what we've been talking about, and we've heard a lot of these today, are what are the challenges specifically for rural heritage. Of course, we've talked about lack of resources a lot already today, funding being the biggest one, and of course the smaller population to draw on. And somebody else today also raised that, of course, that population is possibly shrinking. It's getting smaller, and the population is aging. We also found, of course, that heritage organizations are very dependent on volunteers. That's also come up today. For example, museums have a ratio of 20-1 volunteers to paid staff in rural areas compared to 8-1 in more urban areas. The other issue, of course, if you're in a more remote area, is the expertise you need might not be readily available. There might not be anybody in your community with whatever it is you need. You might be in a remote location that means you're not that easy to get to. We've already discussed at length that there's probably poor internet and or cell service. Even though it's getting better, it still is a big issue. The other challenge is seasonal issues. The odds are, if you're a museum or other heritage organization, a lot of your busy season is going to be May, June, July, August, maybe September. This is also, of course, a busy time if you're in an agricultural area. And I think the biggest challenge is that you can't save everything. Nobody, no group has the time, has the people, has the resources, has the space to save everything. So you have to have very clear vision of what it is you're trying to preserve, who it's for, what stories you're going to tell. You can't save everything.
Now, what if you have a project? You don't know where to start. What if you don't know what you can do? What if you don't know where to go to find solutions or information? What if you don't know any of the options? What if there is more than one way to preserve a doily? What if this has never been done before? What if someone else has done this before?
So we've already talked about and met some of the popular partial solutions. Sorry, I'm reading the chat at the same time here. Partial solution, the provincial heritage agencies whom you've just met. And we're all great and we all have a lot of information. As you've also heard, we're all under-resourced as well. And the other issue is that we all seem to have our own sphere of knowledge. And so how do you get beyond that silo? There are some other groups as well. If you're in a rural area, there might be a Municipal Heritage Advisory Council or MHAC. Not all municipalities have one and not all municipalities have an active MHAC. There's the Manitoba Historic Resources Branch. Sorry, I know that's the old name, but we did the slide before. And as we've seen, their resources have also dwindled over time. Of course, there's other historic societies. There's various cultural and education centers, and we were introduced to a few today. The Manitoba Indigenous Cultural and Education Center, see if I got that right, the Japanese Cultural Center, the Filipino one. There's also some great resources. And of course, even on this chat, on this call, there's a lot of private individuals with areas of expertise as well.
Okay. But what if you don't have readily access these resources? And the questions remain, what do I want to do? What are my options? Where do I start?
So what if we have an annual Heritage Summit like this one, and we keep on doing this year after year? And this is where anyone interested in heritage can get together, discuss heritage issues, ideas, challenges, solutions. It's a great idea, but that's once a year.
What if there was a single entry point to find information that we've just been talking about? What if there was a way to connect with other heritage enthusiasts, not just organizations and agencies? What if you're not all alone in the world? What if you don't have to reinvent the wheel again and again and again?
So may we suggest, typo. We all want a heritage hug, but how about a heritage hub? This has actually come up already today. Somebody in the chat function mentioned something because I can't remember the wording they used, but a heritage hub where it's central accessed, a single point of entry. It's province-wide. It's available for anybody, anywhere in the province. It's cloud-based, so they can be accessed by computer, by tablet, by phone, and it's free. I like that part.
Very much. More than a website, this would be a portal with all the resources we've mentioned and others before us today have mentioned, where it would all be readily available and easily searched to find people, organizations, and associations that exist and can provide resources, expertise, and advice.
Of course, we featuring links to all the previously mentioned resources. Maybe it's searchable by area of interest. I'm interested in archaeology. I'm interested in genealogy. You could do there. It's searchable by geographic area. I live in the Northeast. Is there anybody around me who knows this? I suggest a forum, a place where you can post questions and others can answer. For example, today, Dr. Mickey was talking about working on sugar beet farms. Somebody else mentioned, we have pictures of sugar beet farms. Could you help us identify it? And he was wondering if there were other people who might have pictures. This is a place where we could post these questions and people could share the answers and share the information. Interested individuals could also sign up and contribute. A lot of the information resides in individuals at this point. And so that would be, I think, a good place to start. As somebody else said there's also federal resources as well, though of course we focused on Manitoba. And I suggest that perhaps professionals that charge a fee for services of this kind would pay a fee to be listed. But other than that, free for everybody.
That could include, as I said, searchable database, links to resources, a list of local experts and consultants. There'd be blogs, a forum, a listserv to disseminate information. Like maybe there's a change to some of the provincial grants or the federal grant programs. We'd really like to know, what are some of your ideas?
So where do we go from here? Well, obviously we communicate with each other and we keep communicating and we listen to each other. I suggest perhaps we could write a grant application to get this going. We all know that websites aren't expensive to keep, like it's not hard to have one hosted, but they take a lot of work creating it. Hire an intern, perhaps Young Canada Works in Heritage, to compile the information and contact everybody we've talked to today. Hopefully fees coming in from professionals would be enough to maintain the site. If it's member-based, people could be signing up, updating their own information, their own resources, their own interests. So are you interested in the project? Do you have any ideas? We've set up an email address. It's functional now, mbheritagehub@mymts.net. We've also registered a website name, manitobaheritagehub.ca, mbheritagehub.ca. Of course, isn't live. But I'd love to hear at this point from the other panelists and from you. We're listening.
Well, there's the challenge now. We do have an opportunity. We do have some time. Please, if anyone has some thoughts they'd like to share, this is your opportunity to weigh in. You can post them in the chat. I'll be looking at that. Or you can post it in the Q&A. Please let us know if you have any thoughts. Or, as Monique mentioned, you can send an email if you gestate on this for a little while and have some thoughts later today or tomorrow or the week next week. Send them to them. So far, I'm seeing a lot of very favorable responses here. Something like this would be so helpful. This is an excellent idea. I'm so excited by this. I have lots of questions. I love this idea. We could exchange services and resources and help each other out. Brilliant idea. Yes, yes, yes. I haven't seen anything negative so far.
I would just like to add that for rural museums, this would be absolutely wonderful because the information would be together.
One of the things that we learned as working together with the various PHA members is that we have way more in common than separates us. And by working together, we can achieve the kind of critical mass that most of us simply don't have alone. And there's really no reason we can't work together better. We all decry some of the same problems, and yet the solutions are right in front of us. It's working together as in a cooperative way, rather than trying to compete with one another for the precious few resources that are out there. Work together for mutual benefit. There's a comment here. This project works great with the one CMT launched this summer. I'm curious about data storage challenges. I don't know. Who wants to weigh in on that? Gord?
Come closer to the microphone. Share this.
Yeah.
There are two ways of approaching data storage. One of them is to lease space on a server, or three. Lease space on a server, which we do for the Manny project, because that way someone else is managing the server and the security on it and such. You can host or create your own database and run it, and I know people that basically run a server in their basement and was providing the back end for a website. And then finally, there's something, as you mentioned, that co-op idea. In Ontario, the can't think of the name fast enough, but they have a group that a number of the Ontario libraries take advantage of, that they host their collection of either archival or digitized content. And I know the Whitby Library is one of the ones, because I've been on that site. And the advantage of that is that the Consortium, I believe it's a private company, is providing all the infrastructure and the internet connectivity and the maintenance of the site, and people get their own dedicated site out of it. So instead of having to go out and rent it on your own, last year as part of the Heritage Summit, a few of us were talking about the idea of trying to get a technology consortium within all the heritage groups where we could purchase things in bulk. So instead of each one of us going in and trying to negotiate with a website provider of that service, we could actually get a larger site and then divvy it up between us and have one person that would be responsible for maintenance of it. So, there's so many things we can look at doing, and I think the more we cooperate, the more these type of things are going to come true in the future. They'll come to fruition. Gord.
Okay, it's 3 o'clock, and I think in the interest of keeping moving in our program, we should probably turn things back at this point to Rob. But again, I'll emphasize that if any of you have thoughts that you'd like to share on this idea of a Manitoba Heritage Hub, please, by all means. We've posted the email address in the chat window. Send email there if you're interested in being involved, or if you have thoughts as to how it may be done. And hopefully by this time next year, we might have some more information to share. Who knows? Maybe there even will be a hub by that point. So thank you very much for this informative and I think very thought-provoking session.
All right. Bonjour tout le monde again. Well, this session went actually pretty fast. We're about 15 minutes ahead of schedule, is from what I could see. We would normally have a break at 3:15, so we have a bit of a choice, and which means that for you at home, you have a choice. So you can keep playing games with me, because I'm going to offer you something here, or if you want, it's been a long day. We still have a panelist after this. You want to do break right away, so I want to make sure that our panelists for the upcoming discussion are aware that we're breaking for 15 minutes. So we're going to start the next panel earlier. Yeah. Okay. So there you go. So we're going to have the videos now. If you're panelists for the next batch at 3:30, be ready. We might start a little bit earlier. Why not? If we can. During the break, we will be playing some videos. But I'm gonna leave you with this, just for fun. So, but behind me, I have an artifact that is a classic Canadian kind of thing to talk about, right? And it formed quite a bit of our heritage, whichever heritage it is. And here's the challenge. Here's the challenge. So during the break, I want you to think about how this creature, and if you don't know what it is, it's got big teeth, flat tail, builds dams. Still not gonna give you the name, but I want to see how this creature has impacted your sight, because I think it has in every way. I like to think that this animal has somehow made a difference for everybody here, one way or another. So during the 15 minutes of break, if you're not interested in the videos, go for a walk, go outside, and a little bit of food for thought. Well, I don't know if you want to eat it, but anyways, that's what it is. So you've got 15 minutes. We'll see you in a little bit. À bientôt tout le monde.